Hello, and thanks for joining me for this session on maintenance planning and recording. I'm Katie Steele, Listed Building Support Officer for the Baptist Union, and this presentation is part of the Baptist Heritage Property Initiative, supporting our churches with listed and historic buildings in their care and management, as well as providing more general information on building upkeep and practical approaches to support this, which will hopefully be helpful to anyone involved in or responsible for looking after buildings more broadly. Regular maintenance is recognised as the routine work necessary to keep the fabric of a place in good order. It stops small-scale issues causing great damage or escalating into expensive and challenging crises. However, it will not prevent major problems caused by materials coming to the end of their life, structural failure, or violent damage by storm, fire, or vandals. But regular maintenance, coupled with stitch-in-time repairs to address small problems, keeps a building in the best possible health for the long term. Routine care and repair are essential to keeping your building in good condition. But keeping on top of these, as well as ensuring you have the time, money, and right people to get them done, is not always easy. That's why we recommend keeping an up-to-date maintenance checklist, plan, and logbook, giving you and anyone else who might be involved in the regular upkeep of your building a clear idea of what needs doing, when, and ensuring you're able to budget and prioritise effectively. Because making sure the straightforward regular tasks, which can easily fall by the wayside when we've all got 1,000 things to do, actually get done on a regular basis can not only save you time and money in the long run by preventing minor issues from escalating into much larger, more expensive repairs, but keeping a record of your commitment to these tasks can also help you access funding towards those larger works that are sometimes simply inevitable due to the age of our historic buildings. So in this presentation, we're going to look at what we're trying to achieve and why, keeping the most common factor which leads to deterioration in buildings at bay, the tasks you can undertake to achieve this, and why it's so important. Then the all-important maintenance checklist, plan, and logbook, which are essential tools to keeping your building in good condition. We'll run through a template checklist and how you can combine this with your quinquennial inspection report to make a plan of action, as well as the importance and value of recording your progress by keeping a logbook. Finally, we'll finish up with a few ideas on where to go from here, how you can create and use those documents, or perhaps just a single document to cover all three most efficiently and effectively, places you can go to find out more information, and finally, who to contact if you're not sure about something. So just to make clear, this video has been catered to include anyone who is not yet using a maintenance checklist, plan, and logbook, so it goes step by step through the things you might like to consider when drawing these up. If you already have an established system or approach to planning and recording routine proactive care at your building, we hope you might still find this video a helpful refresher and sense check for your approach. It contains a huge amount of information, and if you're just thinking about setting up a maintenance checklist or have perhaps only recently had your first quinquennial inspection, do take this at your own pace. You should expect that the process of even getting a first draft of these documents together may take you a few meetings, and you may also need to come back to particular parts of this video as you reach each stage of the planning and implementation process. So we all know the best way to solve a problem is to prevent it from happening in the first place. So taking an approach of addressing the cause, not the symptom, is absolutely the best way to keep our buildings in good health. Of course, our buildings constantly deteriorate through the natural actions of weathering and wear and tear, and where left unattended, this deterioration can lead to more significant issues of decay and disrepair, requiring far more costly intervention. As mentioned in our videos relating to quinquennial inspections, Historic England's Value of Maintenance report found that minor defects left unaddressed could see increases in repair costs of up to 25% every 5 years, concluding that those churches that do not promptly attend to defects are increasing the risk of far greater cost liability as a result. In particular, they noted that defects to roofs and rainwater goods deteriorated rapidly between quinquennial inspection reports. Delaying repairs to these elements resulted in a more rapid increase in cost liability. These elements were found to be costly to repair in and of themselves, as well as the main cause of defects in masonry and interiors, where the consequential damage can escalate rapidly. Whilst there are lots of factors which can affect how quickly or severely the natural deterioration of your particular building might take place, there is one that you should pay attention to when considering where to prioritise budgets and focus your time and energy, regardless of what your building's made of, how old it is, or where in the country you are, and that is water. Water can cause all manner of issues, from physically undermining your building's structural and protective features to damaging furniture and finishes, and even creating the ideal conditions for fungus like dry rot and other vegetation and algae to grow. It also alters buildings' thermal performance, as saturated wet walls conduct heat far more efficiently than dry walls, not only impacting negatively on your building's environmental performance, but also reducing the comfort levels experienced by occupants, increasing heating demands, and having both an environmental and financial cost. Beyond avoiding these day-to-day negative impacts, taking an approach of routine care also has much more far-reaching implications in these areas. As also highlighted in the Value of Maintenance report, once churches reach a critical point of deterioration, the costs increase rapidly, and even relatively high regular expenditure cannot bring the building back to a stable condition. In such cases, only major schemes of work can address the issues faced. As such, the churches that undertake regular maintenance spend less in the long term. And that also applies to environmental cost. Environmentally, the long-term case for routine care is also clear, as the embodied carbon in your building, that which was used and released in its construction, and the production and transport of its materials, can be divided across all of the years of its use. As with any other resource, it is therefore most sustainable for us to prolong our building's use, as the longer we're able to use them without tearing them down and starting again, the lower their environmental impact. So, if you prioritise nothing else, work out how your building has or hasn't been designed to expel water away from the fabric, and ensure all the features which help it do this are in good repair. Of course, different construction types and styles of building will have particular features for this purpose. And that's where your quinquennial inspection or a helpful conversation with your professional advisor should come in handy for clarifying exactly what should be the priority at your particular building. But as a general rule of thumb, and as highlighted previously, the elements which have the most devastating impact, if not in working order, whatever size, shape, and material they come in, you'll need to check and care for your roofs and rainwater goods, as well as your repointing and render, or more broadly, walls. Starting at the top then, roofs. Whatever your roof covering, its purpose is to provide a surface over which the rainwater can run, guided by gravity and usually directed to rainwater goods. Look out for slipped or broken slates or tiles and any obvious gaps or cracks, especially at your roof edges, where if it meets any other elements such as parapets or other roof pitches, awkward connections may occur and be difficult to make watertight. Here you will usually find leadwork or another flexible sheet material, including in some cases felt. These may be starting to show signs of age, have become dislodged or been damaged either by natural occurrences or perhaps less natural occurrences, or they may simply not have been installed correctly. In addition to cracks, rips and tears, since these materials are often common to flat roofs, it is also important to keep an eye on their fall, i.e. whether they're providing a steep enough gradient to expel the water away from the building, as, particularly on large flat roof spans, pooling can be a common sign that something isn't working the way it should. Of course, where water is collecting, this may not be due to the inadequate fall. It's also important to check areas which are prone to moss buildup or other debris, flora, fauna, or otherwise. These can not only affect the flow of water, holding it in concentrated concentrated areas and becoming susceptible to frost damage to the roof covering beneath, but may also get swept away to narrower sections of your rainwater's journey, where it might cause even greater issues. So try and arrange for this to be removed as soon as possible. If in doubt, observing how water is transported is always a good test. And whilst having a look around the exterior of your building after heavy rain is good practice, you may also find that pouring water directly on areas you're unsure about to see what happens can give you an indication of what's going on. This brings us on to the next point of attention: rainwater goods. Again, these will of course vary in shape, size, and material from building to building. But in this category, you might find gutters, downpipes, gullies, sumps, underground drainage, and soakaways. Anything with the core function of channeling water. You may even have the odd gargoyle, depending on the age and style of your building. Here you're looking for blockages. As mentioned, often caused by debris falling directly into them or being swept from your roofs. Again, holes and cracks are the enemy where water is involved, as it has an uncanny habit of managing to use them to find its way into your building. The flow of water should indicate whether everything is in working order, assuming it's flowing where it should be, whilst any wet or green looking patches will be a sign it's not going where it ought to. So cracks in cast iron, downpipes and lead-lined gullies, sections no longer attached or misaligned, and debris and vegetation obstructing the flow of water, be that through gutters or in gullies, are all key items for attention. Helpfully, SPAB have an excellent series of videos on maintaining both roofs and rainwater goods, including what some of you may find to be an exciting new use for some of your kitchen implements. And a link to those videos is in the description below. Also on the topic, the National Churches Trust have produced a video which can be found on the Maintenance Booker website. Moving on then to walls. But I was trying to go for a memorable 3 R's, so render and repointing. Obviously, not every chapel has render or pointing, but as the vast majority of chapels are brick or masonry, chances are yours does. For buildings of other construction types, do a bit of research on their common defects or deterioration patterns. And of course, your quinquennial inspection should be really helpful for this, or as I say, a quick conversation with your professional advisor. If you are working with brick or masonry, or in fact any type of cob, the key thing to make sure of and understand is the appropriate mortar or render which should be used, as there are fundamental differences between modern cement-based and traditional lime-based mortars, renders, and washes. Now, this is a huge topic with lots of nuances. However, the reason it's important to understand what's appropriate for your particular building, or indeed parts of your building if you've had a modern extension to an older main chapel or schoolrooms, is that lime-based mortars are generally breathable and much softer, whilst cement-based mortars are generally hard and impervious or waterproof. And this can have a number of effects on how your building behaves and deteriorates. Firstly, water will be able to track through lime-based materials, meaning that it will be drawn out of the wall and evaporate when conditions are right. Issues arise when this can no longer happen and the water becomes trapped. And many common damp proofing measures, such as injected damp proof courses or plastic-based waterproof paints, or indeed cement-based renders, create an impervious layer which ultimately traps water in the fabric rather than keeping it out. The complete opposite to the purpose for which they are promoted. Secondly, because it is so soft, lime-based mortar is often used because of its capacity to act as a sacrificial material. Protecting soft historic bricks or soft types of stone, as well as accommodating movement in the structure. Again, this is in contrast to cement-based mortars and renders, which are extremely hard and brittle, and therefore susceptible to cracking, leaving them vulnerable to water entry. In cases where they are harder than the bricks or stone which they bind together, this will often lead to spalling, or the faces of the bricks or stone being blown due to water trapped against them freezing and expanding, something which is avoided in newer buildings by virtue of the fact that modern bricks are fired at much higher temperatures and are therefore much harder. Whilst historic mortars and plasters are often described as soft and rubbish and not fit for purpose by builders and contractors used to using hard, quick-setting, cement-based mortars, the fact that their softer lime-based counterparts have been used for centuries proves they are more than able to stand the test of time when properly maintained and cared for. This is one of the many reasons that understanding your building, as well as ensuring you work with professionals who are used to and knowledgeable in working with historic buildings and traditional building methods, is so essential. As a rule of thumb, one way you might be able to tell whether your mortars are lime-based is by pressing a fingernail into their surface. If you're not able to do this, the mortar is likely cement-based, but be aware, it is not uncommon for buildings originally constructed with lime-based mortars to have been repointed, perhaps only superficially into a depth of 5 millimeters with hard cement-based mortar. If this is the case, there will likely be signs of it. In places, it may have cracked and dropped away, revealing the softer mortar behind. So, things to look out for. Any gaps or cracks. If these have gone overlooked for long enough, there might even be a helpful plant or two signalling their presence. Falling and pockmarked bricks and stone, which can sometimes be very extreme, are likely to indicate the use of inappropriate materials, whether mortar, render, or fixings. Note too that once spoiled or blown, the protective patina of the bricks or masonry is likely to have been compromised, so they may be more susceptible to deterioration. Likewise, pay attention to the details of your building, which have been designed to keep water away from the walls. Drip courses, coping stones, and windowsills may be particularly important to water shedding and perhaps susceptible. And any other shallow or horizontal surfaces which might collect water like plinths. And as with your roofs, awkward joints between building elements are worth extra attention. So as mentioned, SPAB have really helpful videos on all three of these areas, which we'd really recommend you watch before getting stuck in to any of these tasks. The videos are only 5 to 10 minutes long and give really helpful and clear explanations of these topics, as well as doing a quick walk around of a building to point out examples. As I say, they're linked in the description below. So I hope that's been helpful in highlighting what, how, and why prioritizing items which help transport water away from your building is so important. The knock-on effects of watering grass, as you may know from experience, can be some of the most damaging and expensive to both live with and address. But of course, complete care of your building encompasses more than just these three elements. So let's have a look at a maintenance checklist and see how it can help you keep track of what needs doing and when, as well as create a record that can be invaluable to understanding the context of any recurring and future problems, so they can be addressed effectively. Where your quinquennial inspection is like going to the dentist or having an MOT, keeping up with routine maintenance is like brushing your teeth or getting your car serviced. It ensures that once the professionals come and have a look to do an assessment of condition and safety, your building is going to perform as well as it can. Of course, the point isn't to perform well in those assessments just for doing well's sake. Having a safe, well looked after building which represents you and serves your mission is central to why routine care is worth the time, energy, and outlay. So it really does what it says on the tin. It's a list of routine checks and tasks which you can undertake to maintain your building in good condition. Importantly, though, it also helps you organise the time, people, and money you'll need to do this, and over time creates a record of what's been going on with your building, which can be essential to understanding the best way to approach addressing issues. There are various maintenance plan templates available. And as always, we'd really recommend looking at a few of the options available to see what works best for you and your building. But to give you an idea, I'm going to have a quick whip through the template which was published following the government's Taylor Review pilot last year. Others will be linked in the description below. The project aimed to find sustainable approaches to caring for the nation's historic places of worship, given common challenges faced by those who look after them, such as difficulty resourcing their care and repair. Following the project, the support officers involved in the work, which specifically focused on helping with maintenance and routine repair, highlighted 3 things. 1, the importance of the people on the ground. It's widely acknowledged that places of worship benefit hugely from the efforts and energy of those who give their time to ensure they stay safe and comfortable for those who meet in them. So whatever you do to contribute, whether it's spotting a dislocated gutter, thinking about where budgets should go, finding contractors, or pulling weeds, you are amazing and wonderful. Please keep doing what you're doing and let us know if there's anything at all we can help with. The second thing they noted was how helpful using a checklist to both keep track of what's being done and what's yet to be done was. And that didn't only apply to everyone already involved, but also proved invaluable to getting anyone new or joining the team up to speed. And observation number 3 was that churches who use a maintenance checklist in conjunction with their QI report and logbook are able to plan ahead in terms of pupil capacity and budgets, making sure that they not only save money in the long run, but keeping on top of the routine care tasks your building needs also ensures that you and future members can focus your energy and resources on the things which really matter, your worship and mission, in a building which is safe and comfortable and without the distraction, disruption and headaches of unexpected major repairs. The template was developed and tweaked in response to working with hundreds of churches during that project, so its versatility has really been proven, which is why we think it's a really good one to use. Along with the maintenance checklist, a number of other guides and resources which you might find helpful were created, and they're also available from Historic England's webpage, which is linked in the description down below. So the checklist covers all of the routine tasks common among church buildings and necessary to keep them in good repair. These are grouped into overall areas, and the order the groups appear in is a pretty standard approach church architects and surveyors would take in methodically working to inspect a building, as it broadly starts at the top and works down, much like Rainwater might. The overall areas are, and this will hopefully not come as a surprise to you at this point, roofs, rainwater goods, external, including walls and windows, as well as any outdoor areas like burial grounds, internal and building services. Under each of these categories is a list of tasks which are attributed more generally to a building element, a suggestion of who might be best placed to do the task, and a suggested frequency. What's also included is a space for cost and then columns denoting times of year. There's also a space to note your observations and a space to note any further actions which might be necessary. Catering it to your building is essential, so audit the list to check it covers the right tasks for your building. And in particular, if you're using this template, there are a number which are flagged as if applicable, which you may like to remove. Likewise, there may be tasks specific to your building which you want to add. But don't forget that this should be a working document which you return to and keep up to date. There might not be anything additional at the moment, but over time, perhaps in response to something raised by your quinquennial inspection or whilst using your building, it may become apparent that there is something which it would be beneficial for you to check or do on a routine basis. So including those additional tasks will help ensure that happens. So the checklist has given us a good idea of what tasks we're aiming to include, as well as broad brush ideas of when it might be good to do them and who in theory might be involved. So next, it's important to work out what that means in practice for your circumstances, resources, and budgets. The next section is a few ideas of the things that might affect how you plan for and undertake maintenance and other works to your building, and what you might need to have in place ahead of time. This process of taking stock early will help make sure you're able to make sure the plan of action you propose is realistic and that you're able to address any obstacles to getting things done, giving you the best chance of keeping up with that essential routine care. We strongly recommend you discuss these points with everyone who you anticipate will be directly involved in planning, managing, and undertaking works to your building, as this not only ensures that everyone is aware of the context of any decisions made, but also gives the best chance of everything which might benefit from consideration at this point being raised. First, run down the task list, thinking about resources, the people, time, skill, money, and equipment needed for each task. Discuss if they're available, and this will have practical implications on the plan. If you are currently short on volunteers, for example, you may take the decision to contract some help. The template already includes suggestions as to who might be appropriate, but knowing your building and resources, you may take a different point of view. In particular, think about which tasks you might need contractors for. If you're not sure, this might also be something to talk to your professional advisor about. If you're using this particular template, some tasks are actually highlighted by an asterisk to indicate they commonly vary building to building. Importantly, you will also need to be able to brief anybody you engage to work on your building. So make sure you understand whether they will be able to specify the works themselves or will need a certain level of detail about the works which need undertaking, such as a method statement and material specifications, and make a note of this. As the value of maintenance report pointed out, the positive benefit of a church having regular maintenance contracts in place, as well as a list of trades to call on to any urgent defects, cannot be overstated. In addition, make sure to consider whether any require high-level access. If the task can be undertaken in some places by a volunteer, but not in others, perhaps duplicate this row to help you plan and record these differentiated tasks. Where high-level access is required, it is always most cost-effective to group any works which are in the same area together if possible. We'd recommend marking these tasks somehow, either by colouring them a different colour or creating an additional column to mark them. Once you've done this, it may also be worthwhile considering whether there would be any ways to create permanent access that would allow you to safely undertake routine care without the need for specialists or scaffolding. Again, this is something you may like to discuss with your professional advisor. If there is, just to flag that any intervention to create access is likely to require permissions. Building on access requirements, it is essential to undertake a risk assessment prior to getting started, whether it will be with volunteers or contractors undertaking the works. Having a think about these risks at this stage might be helpful, as they may affect when you can realistically undertake the tasks. What measures can be put in place to remove or mitigate these risks? How does that affect timelines on when they can be undertaken? Adding a couple of columns to the plan, assigning risk ratings, and making a note of any measures you want to take ahead of time will help you bear this in mind when it comes to planning. Additionally, don't forget to double check your insurer's requirements. And finally, what equipment and materials will be needed, especially for those tasks which will be undertaken by you. The plan includes a kit list, which should cover the essentials, but there may be additional items you add either from the outset or as you go. Keeping a list can be important for a number of reasons. Things can get broken or go walkabouts, especially where lots of people are contributing to maintenance and odd jobs. If this is a bit of a recurrence at your building, creating a signing in and signing out list might help keep track of things and help make sure if anything does need replacing, that can be arranged in good time and budgeted for. This should also ensure that tools and materials are available when people need them and are expecting them to be there. There's nothing more frustrating than turning up somewhere with the intention of getting something done and finding out there's a reason you can't get on with it. For this reason, if the items on your list don't all live in the same place, you might also like to make a note of where they do live and should be returned to after use. So the next thing we'd suggest is that you discuss the checklist as you walk around the building, so you can get a feel for exactly what each task will entail. As when it's all in a list like this, it's a bit abstract, so it can be really helpful, again, with everyone involved, to actually look at the list in conjunction with your building. Which are the roofs covered by each section, for example? Which are the problem areas of guttering that often get blocked due to their proximity to trees? It's really about getting to know your building outside in. But the important thing is that when you reach each of these sections, you know where to look on the building, and building a routine can really help with this. We'd also recommend that you have a quick think about the practicalities of actually undertaking the works. Imagine what will happen step by step. Will there be waste to dispose of? Are there any considerations such as collection days or tipping requirements which might dictate when or who undertakes the work? Will the works require protection, for example, to dry or set? Or are they weather dependent? Make a note of these factors and any preparation they might require, such as organising containers or protective clothing. With this much clearer idea of the tasks you're planning for in mind, next time you return to your checklist, you can hopefully start to be a bit more specific. We suggest adding a note of how long you expect a task might take and who might be able to undertake the tasks. In terms of these specifics, it may be that returning to these month by month, so if nothing else, trying to indicate which tasks you hope to undertake in the next quarter or so. And do bear in mind that throughout the process, you will be zooming in to the monthly or weekly overview and zooming out again to the quarter or full year, putting the details in place when you have the requisite information to do so, such as people's availability, but also checking that nothing in the wider context is changing, which might influence decision making. Finally, and probably most importantly, what are the costs of these things? Will specialists, contractors, or high-level access provision be needed? And how much will they cost? Do you need to get quotes? How much will materials and equipment cost? Is this a one-off expense, or should it be accounted for in budgets for future years too? When thinking about costs in terms of your routine maintenance, this sum should allow you to budget year on year, as it is unlikely to fluctuate massively. As we'll see in the next section, this is really the minimum you would ideally set for the care of your building. And as we've seen, if you do nothing else, keeping on with routine maintenance activities can make a huge difference to the long-term condition of your building. Before you move on to the next stage, you might also like to have a final few minutes reflecting on whether there are any other challenges which you think of that you might struggle with. What are these? What will you need to put in place to overcome them and make this happen? You don't need to figure this out right away. It's just about having an awareness. So you've taken stock of the position you're in to attempt tasks on the maintenance checklist at your building. But before making a plan to undertake these, it's essential that you now take into consideration any one-off works and repairs or tasks which might be specific to your building, which of course will have been flagged and assigned recommendations in your quinquennial inspection report. As covered in our quinquennial inspections webinar, which again is linked in the description below in case you haven't seen it or could do with a quick refresher, your inspector's recommendations will highlight any items requiring attention, grouping them according to urgency, usually immediate, 1 to 2 years, within 5 years, and beyond 5 years. And in terms of maintenance, observation, or further investigation, in the first instance, therefore, you can add any items of maintenance highlighted. Assuming you don't duplicate what's already included in the template, it's likely they will be more specific than what's described there. So add them either as a note for particular attention under one of the existing items or as an item in their own right. Next, have a quick look through all the items, then focus on those which are highlighted to be most urgent and go through exactly the same process as before. Which will require high-level access? Which require professional advice or further consultancy? Which should be undertaken by a contractor, and do you have the information you need to brief them? Which can be grouped together? Which have practical considerations, including any risk mitigation measures? Which are you likely to have to fundraise towards the cost of? And do you have quotes for any paid services? Once you have an idea of the tasks you hope to tackle in the first year, add these to your list, as well as any items for observation. There's a dedicated section at the bottom of the checklist. Okay, so that was a huge amount of information. Please do take it at your own pace. Return to each of the sections as and when you need And remember that time planning is never wasted. Famous architect Frank Lloyd Wright said, "You can use an eraser on the drafting table or a sledgehammer on the construction site." Your maintenance plan should be a working document, a tool which you can adapt to your needs and circumstances at any given point in time. Review it frequently. Look out for items which can be bundled together. These might not have the same urgency, and they might come from both your QI recommendations list and the routine maintenance list. Are there multiple items in the same area which could be undertaken in one go? Will multiple tasks require high-level access or specialist skills? Where this is the case, grouping these tasks together can not only save you money, but also minimizes disruption to a discrete period of time. Double check if there are any tasks which should be undertaken in a specific order. It is one of the most common false economies and really fits that idea of treating the symptom without addressing the cause, for people to replaster and redecorate areas which have been affected by water ingress, either before the fabric has dried out properly, meaning that as this takes place, those finishes will be affected, or in fact, without properly establishing what's gone wrong to cause the water to enter the building in the first place, thus leading to the same thing happening over again. And the final tip, sometimes to get started, it's best to just go for the easy wins. It can be really easy to get overwhelmed by the amount of stuff on the list. So keep things manageable. Think about everyone who needs to be involved. Managing the care of your building shouldn't fall to just one person. And also try to spread the word. Everyone who visits your building, especially if on a regular basis, can keep an eye out for both the common signs of deterioration and one-off items of repair due to accidental or natural damage. Let people know what they can look out for and who is taking the lead on building matters. Even if you aren't able to address all of the items on the checklist or recommendations in your QI report, don't let this disparage you from keeping a positive relationship of routine care with your building. Continuing to undertake maintenance does help stave off escalated deterioration. Budget for building matters. Routine maintenance costs, including for replacement of equipment in the longer term, should ideally be accounted for. Many of the things which help keep major deterioration at bay represent recurring and predictable outlays. Materials such as lime or timber with painted or oiled finishes require periodic renewal on a slightly longer cycle than your maintenance plan may initially cover. So factor in budgeting for these over the whole of their life cycle, not only the years in which they fall. And if you're able, you might also apply this to the major works which are inevitable too. If you have a Victorian roof, for example, you may already be seeing the signs that it will need replacing in the next 20 to 30 years, if it doesn't already. Whilst it might never be realistic for your church to budget for this entirely, forward planning for this may also include fundraising, and the majority of funders will request match funding for any grants they give. So keep things realistic. Of course, all of these factors may represent reasons that it might not be realistic for churches to undertake all the recommendations and tasks in their maintenance checklists and QI recommendations, from budgetary constraints, availability of contractors, your availability, or even the weather. If budget is an issue, consider making a fundraising strategy. Fundamental to this is leaning into your maintenance plan. Another key thing which came out of the Taylor pilot being that even where churches did not have enough money to address issues immediately, using a maintenance plan to record and thereafter monitor issues allowed them to work out the best course of action and discuss this with their professional advisor or QI inspector. If resourcing is an issue, perhaps explore ways to involve others in the care of your building. Friends groups are an increasingly popular way to involve people who are perhaps not part of your immediate worshipping community, but who have an interest in historic or local and community buildings and may be interested in supporting you with the care or fundraising needs of your building. In terms of prioritizing tasks, you may like to consider what constitutes minimum intervention, as this is an approach which is not only often deemed best practice in conservation terms, but will also support you in ensuring the scope of repair is limited to that which is really essential, and whether there are any aspects within the proposed works which are perhaps more superfluous and really achieving a state of repair beyond what is absolutely essential, perhaps more in line with modern design ideals. Do have a conversation with your professional advisor, or perhaps a craftsperson or specialist in the works themselves, about what is necessary for the long-term survival of the building, ensuring its structural integrity, slowing its rate of deterioration, and prioritising its continued function. This is summed up really well by the following quote, which is from an article on repairing historic buildings by the Institute of Historic Building Conservation. And we'd really encourage you to bear this in mind as you plan your approach to caring for your building. Many historic elements were designed to be repaired in a minimal or piecemeal fashion. Timber windows, timber frames, masonry, and brickwork can all usually be repaired by piecing in matching materials. At the same time, there are elements such as roof coverings that will eventually require comprehensive replacement to ensure that they remain safe or weatherproof. We'd really recommend having a quick look at the full article, which is again linked from the description below. It's not too long at all and covers a number of other really informative points on the fundamentals of repairing historic buildings. And just a final reminder, if looking to prioritise tasks, not to forget that the key message from the value of maintenance report was that churches that undertake regular maintenance spend less in the long term. And so looking down your maintenance checklist and recommendations, think of those vital aspects explored in the first section, which were of course underpinned by one single aim, the efficient movement of water away from your building. Focus on anything you can do to keep your roofs and rainwater goods functioning properly, clearing gutters and relining gullies, unblocking drain pipes and reattaching dislocated flashings or slipped slates. And don't let the list of things which you can't yet tackle distract you from the things which you can. There will always be something which you can have a go at, whether it's items on your maintenance checklist like regular observation of gutters and roofs, doing a bit of research on best practice for repairs or improvements which you know you'd like to do in the future, or perhaps tinkering with your maintenance plan and checking your records are up to date. Hopefully there's been some helpful takeaways there, whether you're completely new to maintenance planning or have a well-established system. It is most useful if you update it on a regular basis, feature it on meeting agendas, make sure tasks are regularly carried out, and note down the dates things are getting done. Which leads us on to the final topic to cover, and that is the recording of the works. As mentioned, this is a requirement of some funders, so well worth keeping up to date in case you're ever in a position where you may be seeking grants for building works. It also helps get people up to speed quickly and can help your professional advisor understand the context of defects which might emerge. This is all part and parcel of keeping a consistent approach to documenting and reviewing your plan, and we recommend using that as a basis for your logbook. Noting what actions you've done when, or what actions you've not been able to undertake and why, as well as any other useful information. If possible, the other tip that Historic England give is to include plans of your building and any outdoor areas, allowing you to mark clearly exactly what's being referred to and any areas for concern. So anyone else involved with the care of your building, be they volunteers, contractors, or professional advisors, is definitely on the same page and there's no confusion about what's being referred to. Photos can also be really helpful for this. Deciding how to manage this is essential, as this can be done in a number of ways, including by hand, but we would suggest that this is done digitally, and especially if you're used to using platforms which allow you to collaborate on documents such as Google Sheets and Docs, which can be shared using a link and updated by everybody. Alternatively, you may like to save a new version of your template each month and circulate it by email. Make sure that it's something that you can be consistent with and something everyone can access to read and keep up to date. And of course, the Building Information Management app may offer a solution to this, which you might not have considered. Finally, some thoughts from the Taylor pilot and us. Early and regular observations are crucial to reducing repair costs. The perfect people to notice changes which could indicate defects are those who are at your chapel regularly. And whilst that might not have been you for the last 18 months or so, now that we've started to return to our buildings, this is the perfect time to look at them with fresh eyes. So I hope this video will help you bear in mind some of the most important things to look out for, as well as offer some tips and guidance on how you can take an effective and efficient approach to keeping your building safe and comfortable. And of course, looking its best. Unless works are like for like, they may require permissions. If you are unsure whether what you're planning to do will make a material alteration to the fabric of your building, please do send a description of your plans, along with a few photos showing both the area in question and a wider scale picture illustrating its location, as well as any other information which might be helpful to understand your plans, such as product information or specification sheet to listed buildings at baptist.org.uk. As covered at the beginning of the video, roof coverings, lead work and rainwater goods are the most important aspects of your building to check that they are in good repair. And the cost of maintaining these elements, particularly where access is difficult, can be a concern. But there is huge value in identifying these issues early, as this allows you to save up or apply for funding over time. Please undertake a risk assessment before getting started. If the work should be undertaken by a contractor with the requisite insurances to cover the works, plan and budget for this. Please don't let anyone put themselves at unnecessary risk just to save a little money. Paying a professional may also ensure that the works are covered by a guarantee, so do ask about this. And to that end, some works will require consultation with a professional advisor. So the message here is clear: don't try and do anything which needs expert insight yourself. But also, this is an important consideration in planning and budgeting. Make sure you know which of these tasks may attract consultancy or contractor fees. And hopefully a more positive angle on the question of budget is, don't forget that you can claim back VAT via the Listed Places of Worship grant scheme, which is again linked below. This has just been extended to March 2025, which is absolutely phenomenal news. Okay, so that's it. Thank you so much for your attention through this presentation, and I hope that it's been helpful. Also, just to reiterate, thank you so much for everything you do to make sure your chapel serves your church the best it can. A quick reminder that those brilliant maintenance videos by SPAB are linked in the description below, as well as places to go for additional information and resources.